Hi, Cher.
Hey, Candace. Good to be with you.
It's good to be with you on this beautiful Thursday that we are recording.
Yeah.
And the conversation before the conversation about talking about what it means that we have glory. As we as we process this, we
Yeah.
realized there's so much here.
Yeah.
And yet I believe it's a conversation that will not only give all people hope, but especially those of us who have had complex childhood trauma,
Yeah.
and to know that it's worth fighting for your healing
Mm.
because there's so much more to you, to me, to our listeners than the trauma that they've experienced.
Yeah. And it's a hard topic, right? Because if we name glory and that we carry glory, and that you and I have a very solid belief that we carry glory because we are created by the living God and we carry the image
Mhm.
of God in us. Like this is our essence. This is our glory. And that along with that is also the truth that evil is real and
Mhm.
that we do have an enemy that is seeking to mar our glory and wants us to believe that we are bad or evil or wrong, or wants us to believe that we do not have glory and goodness. And so today we're just going to talk about what does this mean that we innately carry glory and that we are in a huge battle for reclaiming really what evil has stolen or tried to steal from us because of our childhood trauma.
Mhm. I liked what you said when we were preparing. We were talking about how much people are drawn towards movies that portray um, good and evil.
Yeah.
And you said something that I want to maybe see if we can talk a little bit more about with our listeners is what is it about watching a movie that we feel the intensity of wanting good to overcome, to win,
Mhm.
and that even in these movies, we find ourselves angry or happy. But you said, and why do we weep?
Yeah.
Like we can watch a movie and weep at something that's happening towards someone else.
Yeah.
But do we believe that we also have stories
Yeah.
that are worth weeping over?
Yeah. And I think it's when we watch a movie and, whether it's true or fiction. And we named a few movies, like you mentioned the Liam Neeson movie Taken
Mhm.
or Les Miserables
Mhm.
or
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, even Cinderella, right? I mean, the movies portray these stories of how evil wants to come in and mar glory. And then there's a battle. And
Mhm.
how we in our soul, we are cheering on good to win the day. And yet, as you said, in our own lives, it's sometimes hard to, and how in a movie we can see this is evil, this is wrong, that is bad. But how in our lives that we have lived and the stories that we have lived and the experiences that we have endured,
Mhm.
it is sometimes very, very hard for us to name that was evil, that was bad.
Mhm.
I need a rescuer. I need someone to come and pull me out of this place that is devouring my soul.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's really hard to name that. And I think, especially because so much of our childhood trauma comes from our primary caregivers or people very close to us.
Mhm.
And in order to name it as evil, we have to name that people who were put in our lives to love us and care for us and delight in us and call forth our glory actually did things that brought deep harm and have caused us to struggle maybe our entire lives with shame and guilt and beliefs that we are anything but glorious.
Mhm. Yeah, and for a child that has experienced complex developmental trauma and however that looked for them, the messages, like you said, that come are going to be, they're going to counter the true message of who God says we are.
Yeah.
And if we believe as we grow older, and even if we've started this healing journey, if we believe that those messages and that trauma touched every part of us, right, it would feel fatal.
Mhm,
But it actually didn't mar
mhm.
our God created image
Yeah.
glory, our
Yeah.
essence, our
Yeah.
spirit. And so for a child that has, um we've said this over and over again, but I feel like we always want to say it because we never want a parent to think that unless they've been a perfect parent and protected their child from everything,
Yeah.
that they're a bad parent. But unless a child, if you have a child that has been raised, um, with the language of who they are, and
Yeah.
the child grows up with the felt sense that they are glorious, that they are worthy to be delighted in, that they are a part of a family, that they play a role, and that their role is celebrated and needed and
Mm.
wanted.
Yeah.
We're not talking about a child that feels like they're the only role and they're the best role or the biggest role. That there's some complexity in that too. We're talking about consistent messages. What that does is create a secure connection.
Yeah.
And so those children aren't going to grow up with the feelings that feel fatal, that there's something so fundamentally flawed with them that even
Mhm.
their own parents can't love them.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's not the way it was supposed to be.
Yeah. Childhood, you said childhood is meant to be a time in our lives when our glory is protected and when we are ushered into the truth of our glory. But instead, pardon me, instead, evil enters the story, our story, and brings harm so that that child instead will believe the opposite.
Mhm. Yes, and the question is how does evil enter in? Well, we can name that evil enters in through abuse, through severe neglect.
Mm.
Um, it also enters in other ways outside of the home, right? It can enter in
Mm.
through a car wreck, or there's millions of different ways that evil can enter in to
Yeah.
try to hijack our glory.
Right.
And so that's why we take the time now to hear the story, know the story, get clarity on the story
Mm.
so that we can come more into agreement, not with what was done to us,
Yeah.
what was maybe said to us, but who are we truly?
Yeah. And I heard an interview recently with John O'Donohue, and he said, our biology is not our identity,
Mhm.
and our story, our history is not our identity. That we carry the essence
Mhm.
of glory in us that surpasses our biology and our history. And we've been talking a lot about this quote that I found on my desk. I'm sorry, I don't know where I wrote it down from, but trauma does not destroy our essence. We are an epic story of glory.
Yeah.
Trauma does not destroy our essence. We are an epic story of glory. And I just feel like in the midst of, we have talked for 30 some episodes about the way that harm has entered and the way that we have um, encountered deep struggles, hard struggles in our lives because of childhood trauma. Like, I feel like I want to just say loud and clear, like, we are an epic story of glory, and that evil does not win the day
Mhm. Mhm.
because we are an epic story of glory. And um, yeah, that just feels super important to me.
Mhm. Well, it's the most important thing that we have to hold on to.
Yeah.
And let's just take for instance, not only our own stories, but maybe we're working with someone who's just coming into the awareness of, I need to figure out what's going on with me. So we get into story, they begin to name the truth of their life experiences growing up. And we don't go into immediately saying, well, your story, your life is an epic story of glory.
Yeah.
Okay. Though we know that to be true,
Hmm.
there is a season, there is a time, and there is a journey and a process. Because first of all, we are continually growing and experiencing more until the day we die.
Yeah.
And so it's not about a time frame, but before we can really be fascinated and awed with that,
Hmm.
we have to go down into the dark places,
Yeah.
and to be able to clearly see a name. And to be honest with you, if we do that, there is this growing sense of, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
I am here for a purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, our prefrontal cortex can grasp this truth. And it's really important that we do grasp this truth that we are an epic story of glory. And yet, in our limbic brain, where we carry our emotions and our experiences and our perceptions and our beliefs, we do not believe the truth that we are an epic story of glory. And that is why, exactly what you said, Kandace, like, we have to go down into the you. We call it the you. Like, we have to go down into the painful places and sit there for a time, analyze what's there, talk about what's there, process what's there, so that we can then be able to come up out of that with a new understanding of what is truer than what my limbic brain has always believed.
Hmm. Yeah. And so we know that um, some of us want to start at the top of the U and skip and go to the other side.
Yeah.
We don't want to go into that U.
So, and I
Um,
want to just say, like, it's the you. We're literally kind of defining this as the picture of a you that we're kind of going through life. We become aware of, hey, here's something about myself that is causing anxiety or agitation or some level of dysregulation and distress. And a lot of times we want to just skip right across and be like, oh, if I do this or I do that, or just believe, blah, 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 and then go on our merry way. But we're inviting a different process that we call the U, going into the U, which is going down into the dark places, like looking at the harm. I kind of, I'm not sure where you were going to go with this, so I'll just go to that place and then I'll let you carry on, Candace. Yeah,
No, I'm glad you defined that because that's going to make more sense with what I'm going to say.
yeah,
And so, um, we've worked with story work coaches and now we have our group. And so we don't always know um if we're going to be going into the U because it's things that get brought up that we're like, And so we ask questions, and sometimes there's a story there, and sometimes it'll take us down into that U. And um, I love the idea, and I've heard other people talk about it. It's like we become midwives for the person that's going down into the U. The labor that it takes to work out. Wow, I just got emotional about that. There's real labor to work out old pain.
yeah.
And so we are able to assist and be with,
Mhm.
right? We're able to help people go there as much as they can, not force, but then to also get a sense of helping them come back up as they're ready, not forcing them to come back up, but also having a sense of um, if they're getting stuck,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And so what I wanted to say about that is there's a I don't want to call it a method, but it really is. And we until we experience it ourselves with
Mm,
someone who knows what they're doing and
mm.
that they've done it themselves, we can't do that with someone else effectively.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just highlight that we experienced this on our recording a few weeks ago in part 1 of Body Hatred when we were talking and you asked me a question. When did you first notice that you hated your body? And right there, as we were recording, I remembered a story. And that then I was able to, after we finished the recording, and for several days, I did go down into the U, and I recognized the importance of that moment in my life when I saw the photo and how I turned against my own body and how that was reinforced through my environment. And I sat there for several days. I wrote a story, which I then brought to our story group, and you helped midwife me through that. And our story group has helped midwife me. Nobody said, snap out of it. That isn't true. Your glory is the most important thing. No, instead, you helped me go deeper into what was true, what did happen, how did that feel, how is that young part of you still holding that, how is your brain still believing that there is truth there, right? And then as we processed it, and I'm not even sure I'm totally out of the U on that story yet. I feel like I'm still lingering there and I still have a lot of curiosity there. Um, but I know I have people who are with me there and holding me there in the U and helping me process so that as it as I grasp and learn and experience what is needed there, then yes, I then emerge from that place of darkness and pain and labor and work and clarification and emerge with a new sense of awareness of my glory. awareness of how evil did try to harm, but how I came through it with understanding the truth of my glory even more.
Mhm. Yeah, and you just really laid out a movie.
Yeah,
It is like it's a battle,
yeah,
an epic battle
yeah,
that we go through,
yeah,
not alone. So when
yeah,
we were littles, we went through these battles alone.
yeah,
And so the the plot thickens when we're in there and we're wanting, 'cause so if we believe that the truth, if you shall know the truth and the truth will set you free, which we do believe, we do have to battle to get to the truth.
yeah. And
Okay.
that
And oh, go ahead.
and that part of that battle is defying the shame that
Oh,
wants
yeah.
to silence us and keep us in hiding. It's that for many people is a huge barrier, is that having to press through and expose to others these stories of deep harm and shame.
Mhm. And so part of that is allowing that person, not rescuing them, not, there's, you're with them. They actually don't need rescued. They just need to be with you and you with them as they begin to see
Yeah.
and hear and get clarity. Because for me, the difference was I could have people, kind of like you say, tell me things,
Mhm.
and I could put it stored in my prefrontal cortex. But until I slowed down and started going to the you,
Yeah.
and I was extracting the treasures in the darkness
Yeah.
and coming up out, it is our glory to overcome battles. It
Mm.
is our glory to be able to face the darkness and watch it flee. It is our glory to say love freaking wins every single time. That's our glory.
Yeah. Yeah. And then to come up and recognize that this place where we felt so much shame and felt compelled to hide, like when we go through the process and we emerge and we recognize our glory, like we have a deeper sense of knowing that we are delightful,
Mhm.
that we carry purpose and meaning and goodness that is to be celebrated, and that is celebrated when we have people who will go through the you with us and who
Mhm.
will allow us to go through the you.
Yeah, and I want to say it leaves a sense of, I want to say, a grateful pride. Like you begin to feel proud of yourself in
Mm,
a grateful way. Um, ultimately for us, we are grateful that God created us in his image and gave us all that we need to overcome
mm,
the trauma, the shame, the pain. But then he invites us into co laboring with him and
mm.
others in the you
Yeah,
to be able to come back out and say, oh, no, no, I have seen the evil and the enemy and the destruction, and I've said, hell no.
yeah, yeah. It's so good, and we're alluding to this, but I really want to emphasize the contrast of how often when we start to go down into the places of grief and loss and sadness and anger and rage and lament, most of the people in our lives cannot bear that pain, and they will feel compelled to try to pull us up and out, and we can acknowledge that that's good desire on their part, but that truly what we need at that point is to begin to allow ourselves to actually feel the sadness and feel the grief and to cry out with the anger or whatever it is that comes up in us. Like the people around us will often try to pull us up and out because they cannot bear to see our pain. But
Mhm.
we are very much needing to go through the you. And I just agree with you. Like, it is so important to have somebody who can stand with you and be with you as you go through that. So, as we close, I want to just invite our listeners that if you are resonating with what we're talking about here today, and if you know that you have stories of harm where there has been evil intent to mar your glory, and that you have not started yet really going into the you, and maybe you don't have somebody who can stand with you, I would encourage start seeking someone who can stand with you, whether that's a therapist or a story work coach or a story group, but find someone and then begin writing the story of one incident. It might have been something that lasted 5 minutes, but it somehow changed the course of your life. Just begin writing the story and get in touch with the particularities of what was happening in that moment. Who were the people that were there? What was the day like? What was the setting? Beginning to move toward our stories of harm is just so important, and it's hard work. It's not, this is the battle, and this is the battle where we reclaim our glory,
Mm.
and it's so worth it,
Yes.
and it is hard, and it is good.
Yeah. It's so true. Mm.
Yeah.
Good conversation. Good to be with you again today. And we probably should talk a little bit more about this in future episodes.
Yeah, it's good, and it's yeah, I'm just feeling the heaviness for our listeners, and I but I know that this is just this is what has changed your life and my life. And so that's what we invite our listeners to.
Yep. Love you, Cher.
Love you too, friend.